Pierre Poilievre hasn't really spoken too much about it, and I don't know what he would say. More of his MPs have been speaking about it, and I don't know if that's the best approach or if that's not the best approach. But what I can say is that Michael Barrett has been, I've said this before and I will keep saying it, I think that Michael Barrett holds very good conservative values. He's a family man. He's got a lot of kids. He's a devoted Christian. He's very well spoken. And this is what he has to say in terms of Chris, the federal conservative, crossing the floor to the liberals. And I'm not going to provide any hints at how good or bad this is. I'm going to leave that up to you to decide. Let's have a look.
Should they resign and ask for the comment?
Mr. D'Entremont says he's not the only one.
And he's a veteran. I forgot. Yes, and he's a veteran. Thank you. I forgot that. That's an awesome thing. I do personally think that there should be a bit of a mandatory service required to maybe not be a politician, but to be prime minister. I do firmly believe that. Okay, you should have to have 2 or 4 years or something. You should have at least gone through basic training in the military. Like, you should have a minimum requirement. And Michael Barrett was in the military. I don't know for how many years, but he's a veteran. Phenomenal.
Well, as I told your colleagues upstairs, all the questions should be for Mr. D'Entremont this morning. I would encourage you to look at his own words about his prime minister. We've been very consistent about what we've said our expectations were for this budget. And Mr. D'Entremont, let me just share with you his own words. He said that, quote, "We warned that the Liberals' out-of-control spending and massive deficits were irresponsible, but of course they did not listen. Now, after 6 months under a new prime minister who promised financial discipline, Canadians are still waiting. He said that he would be judged by the cost of the grocery store. Well, Canadians are judging him, and they're not impressed." So that's what Mr. D'Entremont had to say about Prime Minister Carney. And so here we have, as a member of Parliament, and Mr. D'Entremont, who said one thing and is now doing another, who said one thing to his constituents, that he would fight for an affordable budget to provide affordability for Canadians. And that's certainly not what we've seen. I can tell you that, along with my Conservative colleagues, that what we've said we wanted, we were very clear with the Prime Minister, gave him the opportunity to consult and to make adjustments where needed. If we truly are at this turning point, well, I'll tell you what the turning point is. It's more Canadians turning towards food banks because they can't afford to feed themselves. You look at Deloitte's report about the food packaging tax that the Liberals have kept in place, raising the price of fresh produce by 30%. You look at the industrial carbon tax and the effect that farmers are telling us that it's having on raising prices for consumers. That's why we're seeing people struggling with this affordability crisis. So I can tell you that it's pretty rare that a budget getting dropped and before we caucus for us to be able to say how we're going to vote on it, but it's crystal clear that the Prime Minister was not interested in providing an affordable budget for Canadians, and he's looking instead to try and provoke some kind of costly election. We're looking. That's a question for Mr. D'Entremont.
From your perspective.
Yeah,
but what do you think about him saying that other colleagues might join him, that he doesn't think he's the only one? Are you worried about other Conservatives crossing the floor and giving the Liberals?
I'm not going to engage in speculation on rumors. I'm going to tell you that it is crystal clear that this is not a budget that provides affordability for Canadians, and that's what they expect, that's what they deserve, and that's how we're going to vote. Have a great day.
Okay. I want you guys to tell me down below in the comments what you thought about that. I think that Michael Barrett is a phenomenal speaker. I think that when he's off the cuff, he does a great job. He's got a solid head on his shoulders. He's got a good sense of direction. And in terms of politics, I think he does politics quite well. And I think that this is a phenomenal answer. I do truly think that this was a phenomenal answer. But again, you're watching a video. Who cares what my opinion is? I want to know what your guys' opinion is down below in the comments. And then we're going to take a look here at the United States tariffs, because Trump's tariffs on Canada are going to the Supreme Court. And there's a lot of speculation as to whether the countries will actually receive tariff funds if the United States Supreme Court rules against Trump. Let's have a look.
A reminder that today, President Trump's key tool for deploying tariffs will face a critical legal test in the Supreme Court. The top court is hearing from states and businesses that argue Trump's use of a national security statute to hit nearly every nation with tariffs goes beyond the powers of the president. Trump used the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 for his so-called Liberation Day tariffs and fentanyl-related duties on Canada, Mexico, and China. The Liberty Justice Center, which is representing small businesses in the hearing, has said Congress would not have intended to hand unrestricted powers to the president. I want to bring in William Pellerin now. He's an international trade lawyer at Macmillan LLP. Good morning. Thanks so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So, like in the U.S., Canadians are watching this hearing very closely. What's at stake for Canada?
So there's a lot here riding on the decision in many ways. So first of all, striking down these fentanyl tariffs, the IEEPA tariffs, could provide some short-term relief for those exporters that are still subject to that tariff today, that 35% tariff for goods that are not meeting the CUSMA preferential exemption. Generally speaking, though, I think there's some expectation that the president has many tools in his toolbox. So even if this tariff law was stricken down, we might have to play a little bit of whack-a-mole because there's other tools in the tool belt that the U.S. administration could use. So some potential for relief. Generally, really important overall to see the extent of the U.S. president's powers and what's delegated to Congress, which could provide Canada with some ability to increase our bargaining power, for example, if the court was to strike this down.
If the U.S. Supreme Court does rule against Donald Trump, what happens next, William? And what happens to all that money that's already been collected?
That's, I think, the most important question here. So there's some potential that the courts could also require the refunding of tariffs that have been paid pursuant to that fentanyl tariff, which could provide for a major windfall of U.S. importers and in some cases Canadian exporters that act as the importers bringing it in. So there could be money coming back here. That's generally seen as a low likelihood, maybe 15-20% chance of success on the refund portion, because it's not necessarily the case that if the law gets struck down, that refunds will follow. So that's a big piece. Certainly there could be some money coming back to Canadian businesses.
And lastly, I wanted to get your take on what we've heard from the Prime Minister, who has said a number of times that compared to other countries, our tariffs, and I'm paraphrasing, aren't so bad. We do have some protection under CUSMA. Your thoughts on that? How does the situation with Canada compare to other countries? We've talked so much, even on this network. We all know how tough it's been for a number of sectors, lumber, steel, aluminum. What do you think, William?
Well, that's exactly right. It's a completely different situation depending whether you're in one of these sectors that is exposed to additional tariffs relating to those Section 232 sectoral tariffs. And the problem is that those tariffs, those sectoral tariffs, are starting to apply to more and more different industries. So we talked about steel and aluminum for a long time and autos, but those tariffs are also now being applied to wood products like kitchen cabinets and furniture products, copper products, and it keeps ballooning out. So I think there's more and more businesses that are being hit by those different tariffs that are not the ones that are currently subject to this appeal before the Supreme Court. So it really is different sectors of the economy exposed in different ways. And there's really start of some real harm in the Canadian industry, particularly for those that are no longer able to export economically to the United States. William
Pellerin is an international trade lawyer at Macmillan LLP.
Oh, shit. People think they're actually going to get their money back from the tariffs. I think that's a bit of a pipe dream for some. I don't think that would happen, but we'll have to wait and see how that one plays out. Then you have economists are saying that the Carney government didn't do enough to stimulate private sector. There wasn't enough spending. $78 billion wasn't a big enough deficit. You heard that right.
Let's get another perspective from Jimmy Jean. He is chief economist and strategist for the Desjardins Group. He was also in the lockup today reading the budget. Jimmy, what stood out to you?
Well, I think when you look at the headline number, 78, it's actually pretty close to our view, which was 75. So, and way below some of the more dramatic calls that this could be a triple-digit budget. So that was in a way reassuring.
You're talking specifically. I don't mean to interrupt, but you're talking specifically about the deficit numbers, right?
The deficit, the bottom line. Excuse me. So on the deficit front, looking a little bit better. Having said that, really this was called a generational budget, and we see a lot of the same announcements that have already been made when it comes to infrastructure, when it comes to defense. So not a whole lot of new information on those fronts. What I was really looking forward to is specifics on how they were going to translate that very high ambition they're having at the public level, but to also engage the private sector, because we know when it comes to productivity and investment, it's not going to happen if the private sector is not on board. And part of their strategy is to looking to attract some private investment in some of the projects that they're selecting. But we were really looking for incentives, and that super deduction for productivity is part of it. Incentives to get the private sector, no matter what industry you're talking about, to really invest more in terms of R&D, in terms of innovation. And I would say the numbers that we're seeing in there are quite small. I would have hoped to see something much bolder in order to stimulate the private sector.
And they'll, of course, private companies will just be digesting this now, but have you gotten an early read on how this might be received, particularly when it comes to incentives for private sector investment?
Yeah, well, it won't hurt, but let's recall that we're competing against the U.S., and the U.S. just rolled out accelerated expensing, and they made it permanent and just across the board for pretty much any type of asset. We've kind of gone in that direction, but it's still limited. It's still set to end to start sunsetting in 2030, and from 2030 to 2033. So if you're a business, it's not like in the U.S. where you can count on that policy to be there pretty much forever. Here, there's still conditions attached, and there's still a signal that at some point businesses will not be able, and some businesses are planning really for multi-years, even decades ahead. So they have to factor in that this kind of policy might not be available down the road, whereas it is in the U.S.
All right, Jimmy Jean from Desjardins, thank you so much.
Okay, that's what the analysts are saying, eh? Not enough spending. Not enough spending. We need to spend more. I think that they've spent too much, but that's just me. Hey, I'm not the prime minister, and I'm not an economist. I'm just a regular dude that sees how much money our government has been spending on stuff and going, hey, I don't think that's sustainable. I really don't think that's sustainable. But let me know what you guys think down below in the comments. Do you think that it is sustainable? Do you think that they've spent enough money? Do you think they haven't spent enough money? I'd be curious to know what you guys think down below. Then we got to take a look here at the removal of the Ronald Reagan ads that Ontario launched. Let's have a look.
As the dust over Ontario's anti-tariff commercial begins to settle, there appears to be a shift in Premier Doug Ford's stance. Shortly after the president cut off trade talks with Canada, Prime Minister Mark Carney asserted federal jurisdiction, a sign he was asking provinces to stay on the sidelines.
I'll just re-emphasize that it is the responsibility of the Government of Canada to have these negotiations.
While Premier Ford stands behind his decision to run the commercials, other premiers have started falling behind the prime minister.
Going forward, we're going to ensure that our communications are in line. When the time comes to speak with Americans, we'll do it in partnership with the federal government.
Premier Ford now suggests he'll do the same.
He is the prime minister. I'm the premier. When it comes to national issues, making a deal with the U.S. and anyone else, that falls on his lap. I'm there to support him, suggest ideas, along with every other premier in the country.
At the same time, Ontario is not backing down on its decision to remove American alcohol from store shelves, the only retaliatory policy that has stuck so far.
We took action early and we're not backing down. We think it's the right thing to do.
Do you worry at all that keeping alcohol off the shelves will become the next irritant in the trade talks?
Anything could be an irritant. You know what? We have to stand firm. We have to let the Prime Minister negotiate a deal. And let's be clear, we need a good deal, not a quick deal. So we stand firmly behind the Prime Minister.
Even the opposition says it's not the right time.
I don't think we should end the ban on having U.S. alcohol on our shelves because it's one of the leverage points that seems to be working and putting pressure on the president.
The premier says he is willing to return American booze to the LCBO, but only if negotiations go well. At Queen's Park, Colin DeMello, Global.
But negotiations aren't going well because negotiations have come to a screeching halt because Carney keeps doing things that are pissing off Trump, such as launching ads in America using American past presidents out of context for that matter. Very bizarre. Anyways, love to know what you guys think down below. Can trade talks continue with America, or do you think it's just kind of this is how it's going to be for a very long time? Let me know what you guys think.